My parents said, "You'll never be as good as your sister." I walked away and everything collapsed. My name is Ethan Cole, and for most of my life, I believed loyalty was the glue that held families together. I thought if you worked hard, sacrificed enough, and kept quiet about the bruises no one else could see, one day, your parents might look at you and say, "We're proud." That day never came. I grew up in a modest two-story house on the edge of a small town in Indiana, where everybody knew your business before you had time to live it. My father, Richard Cole, was the kind of man whose silence filled a room heavier than words. My mother, Linda, wielded her sharp tongue like a blade, slicing with comparisons that cut deeper than fists. And then there was my sister, Madison, the shining star. 5 years older, top of her class, homecoming queen, and later, an influencer with thousands of followers hanging on her every curated smile, that I was the shadow that kept the lights on. From the time I was 14, I worked summers at the auto shop, changing oil and scraping my knuckles raw on rusted bolts. While Madison practiced for beauty pageants and posed for prom photos, I swept floors and saved pennies. My parents never hid their favoritism. "She's going places, Ethan," my mom would say, watching Madison rehearse her speech for student council. Then her eyes would flick to me, grease under my nails, sweat soaking through my t-shirt. Well, you'll always be better with your hands than your head." It wasn't cruel in her mind. It was truth. By 18, Madison was accepted into a prestigious university out of state. The town held a fundraiser to help with tuition. I worked the grill that day, flipping burgers, my own acceptance letter to a community college crumpled in my pocket. Nobody asked. Nobody cared. The spotlight was hers, and I had learned to live in the shadows. Still, I told myself family mattered. More than pride. That's what Dad always said. "Bloodsticks, boy. You never turn your back on family." I repeated those words so many times they became a prayer. But prayers don't pay bills. When Madison's tuition outpaced scholarships, my parents came to me. I was 23, working 2 jobs, day shifts at the garage, nights loading trucks. At the warehouse, they sat me down at the same dining table where every family verdict was handed out. "Ethan," Dad started, his voice heavy with the weight of authority. "We need your help." Mom leaned forward, hands clasped. "It's just until Madison finishes school. She's got such potential. Don't you want to see your sister succeed?" I remember nodding, even as my chest tightened. I wanted their approval so badly I convinced myself this was the way. I started wiring money every month. First it was a few hundred, then 1,000, then more. Rent, utilities, medical bills. My paychecks disappeared into the void of family needs. No one said thank you, but I told myself love didn't need gratitude. I told myself I was doing the right thing. That one day, my sister Madison would graduate, land some high-paying job, and maybe, just maybe, she'd look at me and say, "You made this possible, Ethan." But the weeks turned into months, and months into years. Madison lived in a world I could barely touch. New clothes, new phone, spring break trips with friends. Meanwhile, I was living off instant noodles, patching my work boots with duct tape. Every time I handed money over, my father would give a curt nod. My mother would sigh dramatically, saying, "It's such a relief you're stepping up, Ethan." Then, without fail, she'd add, "But don't tell Madison. We don't want her to feel guilty." Guilty, the word echoed in my mind for months. I carried it around with me at the warehouse, loading pallets in the humid air, sweat dripping into my eyes. At night, lying awake in my small one-bedroom apartment, I'd picture Madison's Instagram feed, smiles at rooftop bars, designer handbags, captions about living my best life. Not once did she look guilty. Still, I bit my tongue. Loyalty first. That's what I'd been taught. The breaking point. The first crack came one Sunday afternoon. I'd stopped by my parents' house after a double shift, smelling of motor oil and exhaustion. Madison was home from college for the weekend, stretched out on the sofa in a silk blouse that probably cost more than my rent. Dad was bragging to the neighbors about her grades, how she'd landed an internship in New York. "Our girl's destined for greatness," he said, beaming. Then the neighbor asked, "And how's Ethan doing?" Dad paused, then chuckled. "Ethan? He's surviving. Good with his hands. Not much else." The neighbors laughed politely. Madison smirked. Mom didn't even defend me that I stood in the doorway, groceries in hand. eggs, milk, bread I'd bought for them with the last of my paycheck, and felt the burn of humiliation crawl up my neck. I wanted to throw the bags on the floor and walk out. Instead, I set them down quietly on the counter. Nobody even said thank you. That night, while helping Mom wash dishes, I overheard her on the phone. Her voice carried through the thin kitchen walls. "He'll never amount to much," she whispered. "We can't rely on him." Thank God for Madison. I froze. The plate slipped in my hands, clattering against the sink. She didn't even glance. At me.it was the first time I realized my money was being erased along with my worth. For years, the bills never seemed to end. Electricity's higher this month. Insurance went up. Dad's prescriptions are so expensive. Every time, I wired the money. Every time, I told myself I was holding the family together. But nothing changed. The roof still leaked. The refrigerator groaned like it was dying. The living room carpet curled at the edges. Meanwhile, Madison always had something new. A laptop, a car, a trip abroad. One night, I stopped by the house when she wasn't expecting me. Her laptop sat open on the dining table. She'd stepped into the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, laughing. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe desperation, maybe anger. But I glanced at the screen.an email account. Bank transfers. My name on the memos. Family support. Emergency fund. Rent. But the destination wasn't my parents' account. It was hers. Every dollar I'd sent. Every sacrifice I'd made. All funneling straight to Madison. I backed away like I'd touched fire. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood. But deep down, I knew they hadn't just lied to me. They'd used me. And worst of all, they'd sneered at me while cashing my sacrifice. I didn't explode. Explosions burn out too fast. Instead, I went cold. I stopped seeing myself as their son, their brother. I became their creditor, silent, patient, watching the interest rise, while they thought I was still their obedient mule. I started making moves. Step 1. Evidence. I saved every receipt, every wire transfer, every email. 5 years' worth of proof organized into neat folders. Step 2. Control. I rerouted my paychecks, closed accounts they had access to, froze the credit cards with my name. Step 3. Detonation. I waited. I waited until until Madison was at the table, until my parents were listening, until they sneered at me one more time. That's when I dropped it. "I'm not sending money anymore." They blinked, confused. My mother tilted her head, her voice dripping with denial. "What money? We never received a single dollar from you." My father frowned. Madison's fork clattered against her plate, and that's when I slid my phone across the table. Folder after folder of transfers, screenshots, bank logs. Their names, their signatures. Her account. 5 years of sacrifice, laid bare in black and white. The silence at that dinner table wasn't the peaceful kind. It was heavy, suffocating, the kind that presses on your chest until breathing feels like work. My mother blinked at the folders open on my phone, scrolling with trembling fingers. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. But it was exactly what it looked like. My father leaned forward, his face paling. For the first time in my life, the man who used to tower over me looked small. "Ethan, why didn't you say something earlier?" I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. My voice came out low, even controlled. "Because I wanted you to believe your own lie. I wanted you to sneer at me while you stole. I wanted this moment, right here, when the mask rips off." Madison's lips parted, but no sound came. Her perfect world cracked like glass. She stared at me as if I'd betrayed her, as if I was the one who'd shattered everything. My father's voice trembled, searching for ground. We only asked for help because times were hard. You don't understand what it's like to raise a family." I cut him off. "No, Dad. You don't understand what it's like to be the family's safety net. To work myself into the ground while you told everyone I was useless. To feed the house while you told Madison she was the only one worth being proud of." The words landed like stones. Madison slammed her palm on the table. "I didn't ask you for anything. If you were dumb enough to send money, that's on you." I laughed bitterly. "You're right. You didn't ask. You just took. And Mom and Dad let you." The room fractured into chaos. Mom tried to hush us, her voice high and desperate. "This is a misunderstanding." "No," I said sharply. "This is 5 years of betrayal. Madison shot to her feet, pointing a manicured finger at me. You're jealous. You've always been jealous. That's why you're making up stories to drag me down. Jealous. My voice rose for the first time. Jealous of what? Of being lied to? Of working 2 jobs so you could flash a new car on Instagram? Of being told I'll never measure up while I kept this roof over your heads? My father slammed his fist on the table. Enough. But it was too late. The truth had already detonated. I stood slowly, chair scraping against the hardwood. My legs trembled, not from fear but from release. The way a dam trembles when the flood finally breaks. Rachel. My father started, stumbling over her name, correcting himself. Madison can handle the bills now. After all, she's the good one. I grabbed my coat, my phone, my keys. Where are you going? Mom asked, her voice shrill with panic. I turned at the doorway, the house behind me suddenly feeling foreign, hostile. Out. And I'm not coming back. The door shut behind me with a sound louder than any slam. That night, my phone lit up like a dying firework. Calls, texts, voicemails. Mom, we need to talk. Dad, this isn't fair, Ethan. Madison, you'll regret this. You always do that. I didn't answer. Not once. Why the next morning, the tone had shifted. Excuses first, then begging, then threats. The last message I read before turning my phone off. Mom, we need you. Please. But the truth was clear now. They never needed me. They only needed what I could give. And without me, they were left with each other, the golden child and the parents who raised her to consume. Walking away didn't feel like loss. It felt like release. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating bills I didn't know. I wasn't waiting for their approval like a dog waiting for scraps. I wasn't apologizing for existing. I was free. They had always told me I'd never be as good as my sister, and they were right. I was better. Because unlike them, I knew the value of sacrifice and the power of walking away. The first bill bounced on a Tuesday, a late fee email, the kind you ignore when you think the universe owes you grace. Mom forwarded it to Dad with a subject line that read, "Fix this." Dad replied on it. Neither copied me, for the first time in years. Progress, I guess. By Friday, 3 more notices arrived. The electricity, the one Madison used as a filming backdrop for her glossy morning routines, came with a red banner at the top, "Final warning." The mortgage notice came with a phone number and a bolded phrase, "Immediate action required." I didn't see those emails. I heard about them in pieces. Whispers that drifted to me through people who still lived in the same town. People who'd spent years pretending not to notice where the money came from. Mom tried to keep the choreography going. Candles out, smiles on, voices lifted just high enough to sound normal. She still put fresh flowers on the kitchen island. She still spoke about Madison in a tone designed to impress empty rooms. But the performance suffered from poor lighting. At the end of the week, the water company shut off service for 6 hours. Dad called, furious, confident that yelling was the same thing as paying. He left the conversation with a courtesy extension and a bruised pride. When he hung up, Madison filmed a 12-second clip for her followers, full face of makeup, golden light from the window. "Grateful Friday," she captioned it. "Drink your water, lovelies." She filmed it while she brushed her teeth with bottled water from the pantry. Here's the part no one sees until the lights go out. The family economy was never a mystery. It was a pyramid. Dad's pride sat on top, polished and heavy. Mom's denial held it together like old glue. Beneath that, Madison's image, curated, expensive, ravenous. At the bottom, me. They didn't think of me as part of the structure. I was the foundation poured under the dirt, the part you step on without ever wondering how it holds. So when I withdrew, the ground shifted. The first visible crack was Madison's car. She'd leased something with silver trim and seats that hugged your ribs, something that purrs when you want it to roar. For 2 years, she told everyone she'd negotiated a brand partnership with a dealership. Maybe that was true. Or maybe brand partnership meant she pointed at a payment plan and said, "Put it on my father's name." Either way, the car vanished in broad daylight one Thursday afternoon. She watched the tow truck pull away from the upstairs window and didn't come downstairs for 4 hours. When she finally did, she wore sunglasses and told Mom she needed to borrow money for a short-term fix. Mom said, "Of course, sweetheart." Dad didn't speak. The call came in at 10:43 p.m., The hour between pretending and truth. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, another. Then a text. Mom, Ethan, honey, we're having a small hiccup. Could you spot us for the mortgage just this month? Things are in motion. We'll make it right. I read it twice and didn't reply to AT1108. Dad broke his pride. Call me. I didn't. At 11:27, Madison finally stepped in. You made your point. We're good here. Send what you owe family. A heart emoji followed, like stuffing gauze in a fracture. I turned the phone face down and let the room be quiet. When begging failed, the narrative began. That Sunday, in the kind of church where sermons are delivered like TED Talks, my parents sat straighter than usual. They shook hands harder. Mom lingered near a woman who runs a prayer chain and whispered the words estranged, rebellion, influence. Dad spoke gently to an older man in the back pew, a man who makes loans look like favors. He used the word temporary 3 times. Madison posted a photo of herself in the parking lot. Black dress, sunflower, Bible on the passenger seat. Some storms are sent to wash you clean, she wrote. Comments flooded in, adoration, envy, advice, outrage. She replied to 3 of them with prayer hands. When she got home, she pulled a stack of packages from the porch, PR mailings filled with things she didn't need, collagen powder, a sculpting wand with a too long cord, an eye cream that promised miracles if you believed in them hard enough. That night, the power flickered again. She filmed by candlelight and called it cozy. 2 weeks later, the mask slipped. Dad, we've got a date from the bank. If we don't cover 2 months by Friday, we trigger foreclosure. You're the reason we're here, son. You pulled the rug. I stared at the message longer than I care to admit. Then I typed and erased 5 replies. In the end, I sent the only thing that felt honest. I didn't pull the rug. I stopped lying on the floor so you could stand taller. No response. 5 minutes later, my screen lit up again. Mom, remember when you needed braces? We found a way. When you didn't get into your first choice school, we made calls. It's time to give back. A pause. Mom, we raised you. I thought of late night shifts. Double bag groceries, shoes bought used. I thought of the email I'd found. The transfers labeled emergency fund. Money that paved Madison's image while the roof leaked directly into a saucepan on the stove. Then I put the phone down and let the battery die. Houses have memory. They hold fights in their corners and laughter in their hallways. They keep secrets in the backs of closets. This house used to smell like my mother's rosemary bread and my father's cologne and the clean scent that follows. A thunderstorm. Now it smelled like a dying battery in a smoke detector. A small, sharp panic. The lawn grew 2 inches higher than Dad liked before the mower came out. The porch light burned out and stayed out. A real estate flyer blew against the front step and stayed there for 2 days, like a premonition that had given up on manners. Neighbors notice in ways that look like kindness. Everything okay? They ask while handing you your mail like they found it on purpose. If you ever need anything, they say, when what they mean is, we can see you drowning from our kitchen window. Mom smiled the brittle smile of a woman performing a role and said, we're blessed, truly. She always had a talent for lighting candles while the room filled with smoke. At some point, they turned on each other. Madison accused Dad of humiliating her at dinner. You let him talk to me like that, she said. You let him expose me. Dad accused Mom of coddling. You made her believe money appears because feelings are strong enough, he snapped. You taught her that someone will always pick up the bill she drops. Mom accused me through the air as if I stood in the room. He forgets this is a family, she said into the cold stew on the stove. He forgets who made him. Madison accused me on a live stream, vague enough to dodge naming, sharp enough to draw blood. Sometimes the people who owe you the most pretend you're the problem, she said to 1,000 watchers, tears glossing her eyes like a filter. Her followers flooded the comments with stay strong and cut off toxicity and heart. Icons that glow like emergency lights if you stare long enough. Someone sent me the clip. I watched it once without sound and closed the window. 3 months into the unraveling, a notice appeared on their front door. Not the first, not even the worst, but the one that made Dad sit on the stairs for an hour with his head in his hands. Intent to accelerate, there's a particular humiliation in paperwork taped to a door. Public, adhesive, final. You can peel it off, but the glue stays. Madison swore they'd fix it. She promised to monetize smarter, to leverage to announce a new line, to partner with a salon, to host a retreat. Words like a bouquet. Pretty until you realize the water hasn't been changed in weeks. Mom called 3 relatives. One sent $200 and a voicemail that ended with praying. 2 didn't answer. She started storing documents in neat piles in the dining room like order could fend off consequence. It can't. She color-coded the hopelessness. Dad drove to the bank in a shirt that used to fit better and spoke to a man half his age who explained numbers like they were commandments. Dad left with a brochure and a neck ache. The knock came on a Wednesday morning. Not the sheriff. Not yet. A man in a company polo with a clipboard and a practiced sympathy. I'm here to do an occupancy check. Mom's voice wobbled. This is our home. He nodded, jotting something down. I'll mark you as contacted, he said, soft. You'll get a call. Madison filmed from the upstairs landing, her hands shaking. She posted the clip with the caption, "When vultures circle," and wrote a paragraph about predatory lending. The comments were vicious. They always are when people smell fear. She deleted the post an hour later. It came at 1:14 a.m. when honesty slinks on a keyboards. Dad, I was wrong to say what I said at dinner. I was angry. I was proud. I shouldn't have compared you to your sister. I shouldn't have asked you the way we did. We need help. I read it 3 times. There was no spin this time. No myth. Just a man running out of ground. I typed. I believe. You're sorry. I also believe you think that apology should unlock the same door. It doesn't. A long pause. Then Dad, what do you want from us? I stared at the blinking cursor until my eyes burned. I wanted a childhood rewritten, a ledger erased. Words unsaid, dinners unruined. I wanted years back. No one can afford that. So I wrote the only thing I could live with. I want you to learn how to live without me. And I want you to tell Madison the truth. To her face. Not as anger. As accountability. No reply came that night. In the morning, a new message, Dad. She won't. Forgive us if we say it, not me. She doesn't have to. You do it anyway. You can love people and refuse to be their gravity. This is the lesson no one teaches in families like mine, where love looks like sacrifice until you can't tell the difference between devotion and debt, where loyalty is a leash, where you're fed the myth that boundaries are betrayals and silence is cruelty. I learned late, but I learned. Madison posted less. The gaps between content widened. The glow around her dulled. Her captions got shorter, then vanished. She started sharing other people's quotes. Mom became a regular at garage sales, buying nothing, learning the names of strangers who called her Han. Without looking at her face, Dad took long drives without telling anyone. He sat in the parking lot of the old baseball field and watched a chain-link fence hold back an outfield like someone ordered it to obey. The house stayed upright longer than I expected. Systems fail slowly before they fail all at once. It wasn't a storm or a lawsuit or a sheriff on the lawn. It was a Tuesday morning in May, with a sky so blue it looked manufactured. Dad parked across the street instead of in the driveway and sat there for 10 minutes before he went inside. Mom had already started packing the everyday things, the spatulas, the chipped mugs, the towel that no one liked but everyone used. Madison refused to pack. She sat at the kitchen table staring at a screen that refused to change her life. There were no tears. Tears require energy and belief that someone will wipe them. A moving truck arrived. Not theirs. A bank's courier service, efficient, contracted, bored. They inventoried the house with a kindness that felt worse than cruelty. 3 neighbors stood on their porches at once. They didn't wave. They didn't whisper. They watched like people learning the weather has rules. Dad signed papers. Mom signed papers. Madison didn't sign anything because there was nothing left with her name on it besides a feed that wouldn't feed her back. By sunset, the house looked like a mouth after a tooth extraction, empty where it mattered, raw where no one would. See, they spent that night in a motel off the highway. Dad stared at the ceiling. Mom stared at the door. Madison stared at herself. I didn't drive by. I didn't need to. Some chapters end without your hands on the page. When foundations crack, you can pour new concrete, or you can build somewhere else. They chose the first. I chose the second. Dad found part-time work at a warehouse and stopped introducing himself by his former title. Mom started volunteering at a thrift store and learned how to listen without giving advice. Madison, I don't know. She disappeared from town, from my periphery, from the light that used to shine on her like a deal she didn't earn. Sometimes the algorithm sends me a ghost of her, a reshared memory with comments turned off. I scroll past, once months. Later, Dad texted, told her the truth. She broke the plates. Then she broke the silence. I wrote back, "Thank you." He replied, "We're trying." I believed him. Trying isn't the same as changing, but trying is a door. They finally found where the handle is. Silence used to be punishment. It was the pause before my father's disappointment, the hush that followed my mother's sighs, the wait in a room after Rachel's praise drowned me out. Now, silence is mine. The first morning in my new apartment, I brewed coffee in a machine I actually chose, poured it into a chipped mug that didn't carry history, and let the hum of the fridge be my only company. It wasn't lonely. It was ownership. Every square foot belonged to me. Every bill had my name on it. Every locked door answered only to my key. That silence? It wasn't judgment anymore. It was freedom. Walking away from my family didn't erase them. The ghost of them lingered in muscle memory. When I bought groceries, I caught myself calculating how much extra I could send home. When I paid rent, I wondered how many lights in their house my payment could have kept on. When I splurged on a new jacket, I almost justified it out loud, like someone was still watching. But slowly, I rewired. I started small, a savings account, one I didn't share. A weekend class in woodworking, just because I wanted to learn how to shape something with my hands. Dinners with coworkers who didn't know my last name, didn't know the baggage, and didn't need to. For the first time, my money wasn't a leash tied to obligation. It was a map, one that pointed toward my own future instead of theirs. 3 months after cutting them off, my bank app showed a balance I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. Nothing extravagant, but mine. I stood in line at a hardware store, holding a lamp I didn't need but wanted because it looked like sunlight trapped in glass. Behind me, a father scolded his son gently for grabbing too many candy bars. "You can't take more than you can carry," he said. The words hit me harder than they should have. For years, I carried more than was mine, until my back bent under it. Now, my arms held nothing but a lamp and a bag of screws. My shoulders were light. I bought the lamp, carried it home, and set it on my desk. Every time it glowed, I remembered, I am allowed to carry only myself. 6 months in, I saw Rachel again. It wasn't planned. I was at a cafe, laptop open, working on designs for a client who actually respected me. When I looked up, she was there, lined coat, sunglasses perched on her head, hair immaculate but tired. She froze when she saw me. For a moment, the old instinct nearly returned. The urge to stand, to apologize for existing, to make her comfort the priority. But the silence inside me was louder now. I didn't move. She sat at the next table, ordered nothing, fiddled with her phone. Eventually, she leaned toward me. "You ruined everything," she whispered. I looked at her, calm. "No, I stopped paying for everything." Her jaw tightened. "They're falling apart without you." They were already falling apart, I said. They just kept landing on me. She didn't argue. She didn't apologize. She just sat there, staring at her hands like they held a life she couldn't balance anymore. When she left, I felt no triumph, no revenge, only distance. That cafe became mine again, my laptop glowing under my lamplight memory. 2 months later, Dad wrote me a letter. Not an email, not a text. Paper, ink smudged by a hand that shook. "Ethan, I won't ask for money. I know that door is closed, but I owe you words. I believed being hard on you would make you strong. Instead, I confused strength with servitude. I let your sister consume everything, and I called it love. I don't ask you to forgive me. I ask you to live better than I taught you." I read it twice. Then a third time. I didn't frame it. I didn't burn it. I folded it once and tucked it into the back of a drawer. A reminder, not of his apology, but of my line in the sand. Life didn't become a movie montage. Bills still showed up. Work still drained me. Some nights still echoed with old voices. But the difference was choice. I joined a gym, not because I wanted muscles, but because I wanted to feel my own body carry me without breaking. I started volunteering at a youth center once a week, teaching kids how to build simple furniture. Watching them shape wood into something real reminded me that worth is built, not given. And slowly, I built a circle. Friends who didn't see me as a wallet. A mentor who didn't care about my family name. A neighbor who lent me sugar without asking about my past. Piece by piece, I built a home out of silence, laughter, wood, steel, and the sound of my own voice finally unchained. A year later, I agreed to dinner. Neutral ground. A diner with squeaky booths and bad coffee. Mom looked older. Dad looked smaller. Rachel didn't show. They didn't ask for money. They didn't mention Rachel. They just asked how I was. It was clumsy, awkward, and late. But it was something. When the check came, Dad reached for it. For the first time in years, I let him. As I stood to leave, Mom touched my hand. "You're stronger than we ever were," she whispered. I didn't reply. Some words don't need answers. I used to believe I was the shadow of a golden child. The mule pulling a family cart, the silence at the table. Now, I am Ethan, a man who built his own gravity. I am not better because I walked away. I'm better because I finally walked toward myself. And in the silence of my own home, I can finally hear the only voice that matters, my own.